Before we start, just a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. Only 2% are subscribed. At 1,000 subscribers, I'll be posting a special video. Mia lifted her glass and yelled my full name across the table. I felt the whole group look up at once. My face went hot before she even said anything. You know that feeling when your body panics faster than your brain? That was me right there, frozen with a stupid smile. I'm Alex, I'm 26, and that was the exact second my stomach dropped. Okay, listen to this about Alex, she shouted over the music. Her arm hooked around my shoulders like we were a comedy duo. Everyone leaned in, elbows on the sticky table, eyes sharp on us. I laughed a little too loud and tried to pull her hand down. She shook me off and grinned like she had the winning story. I thought she would talk about something harmless and funny. We had plenty of those little stories ready for nights out. Instead, she said, so the first time we slept together, and paused. Two of her friends squealed before she even finished the sentence. My smile stayed on my face, but it felt nailed there. I could have shut it down right then, I know that. I could have said nope, that stays between us, next topic. But I heard myself laugh and go, oh my god, Mia, seriously. That fake casual tone people use when they feel cornered. Everyone took that as permission and leaned in closer. So picture this, she said and tapped my chest like a drum. She started describing how nervous I was that first night. How my hands shook a little when I took off my shirt. How I kept asking if she was okay every 5 seconds. On the surface it sounded sweet, underneath I felt stripped. They laughed at the needy part, the unsure part, the fumbling part. One of her friends smacked the table and almost spilled her drink. Another covered her mouth and said, stop, I can't, I'm dying. I sat there with my arm on the back of Mia's chair. I looked relaxed enough that no one saw my leg bouncing. She didn't stop at nervous, she pivoted straight into performance. And then, she said, pointing at me, he finishes way too fast. The table exploded so hard my ears rang for a second. Someone actually clapped like she just nailed a punchline on stage. I felt my throat tighten so fast I had to clear it. I tried to salvage it and turned it into a self-roast. Yeah, strong start, short episode, I said and raised my glass. The group roared louder like I had confirmed the whole thing. Inside I felt this weird split, half numb and half burning. I kept thinking, this is not a joke to me. It didn't stop there, obviously it never stops there. She added sound effects, little impressions of my voice that night. She mocked the way I apologized right after we finished. She imitated my face when I realized how quick it was. I stared at the table edge so I wouldn't see their eyes. Come on, it was cute, she said and squeezed my cheek. Her fingers dug in a little too hard for something playful. I hated how my body leaned into her touch anyway. I hated how I still wanted her hand to stay there. That mix of affection and shame made me feel actually sick. One of her friends looked me up and down like a review. Honestly, we've all been there, right? She said with a shrug. Then she locked eyes with me and smirked a little. Still, for a guy his size, that's disappointing, she added. The whole table howled while my brain echoed that one word. I laughed again because what else do you even do? My voice came out weird and thin like it didn't belong. Wow, love this support system, I said and knocked the table. Mia rolled her eyes and kissed my shoulder like I was dramatic. That kiss felt more like a silencer than affection. I tried a topic shift and asked about someone's new job. Two people answered with half their attention and drifting focus. Then Mia steered it right back like it was nothing. Anyway, the funniest part was the second time we did it. My stomach dropped lower because I knew what came next. She started talking about the position I liked most with her. Not just which one, but how I asked for it. The exact words I used, the exact way I touched her. Her hands moved in the air, replaying my moves for them. I felt like she had cracked open our bedroom and turned on lights. Dude, you're bold, one of the guys said and nudged me. He made a face like he was half impressed, half amused. Did you practice that line? He asked, eyebrows raised high. I shook my head and tried to laugh it off again. Every sound coming out of my mouth felt wrong and stiff. I leaned toward Mia and lowered my voice near her ear. Can we not go into every detail? I whispered, trying calm. She shrugged me off again, eyes still on her friends' faces. It's just funny, she said, not even looking at me. That sentence hit harder than any of the actual jokes. Here's the part that still stings when I think about it. I remember checking their faces, not hers, like that mattered. If at least one person looked uncomfortable, I could excuse it. Tell myself the group saw the line and she just slipped. Instead, every single face showed pure entertainment and hungry curiosity. They started firing questions like it was a Q&A. How often do you guys do it? Who starts more? Does he like dirty talk or is he shy? Each question turned me into some weekly show they subscribed to. Mia answered most of them before I could even open my mouth. She talked about frequency, preference, little quirks I never shared. She mentioned a thing I once said about my body in private. A comment I made on a bad day just to her. Hearing it repeated now felt like a slap in front of strangers. I picked up my drink and tried to steady my hand. The glass almost slipped because my palm felt slick and unsteady. I forced another joke out because I thought humor equals control. If you guys start a podcast about me, at least pay me. They laughed again while my chest buzzed like a trapped hornet nest. At some point I excused myself and headed to the restroom. My legs felt wooden as I walked past the other tables. I stared straight ahead like if I blinked I might cry. In the mirror I looked fine, which almost pissed me off. On the inside I felt like someone had pulled my skin off. I gripped the edge of the sink and tried to breathe slow. Part of me thought I was making a big deal. Another part kept replaying her voice saying my intimate details. I remember thinking, if this is normal, why does it hurt this much? I rinsed my hands just to have something to do. I told myself I was being sensitive and guys joke worse. I reminded myself she loved me and obviously meant no harm. That little speech in my head sounded polished and fake. Even then, I noticed how rehearsed I was at excusing people. I still walked back to the table like nothing happened. When I sat down, they were mid-conversation about something else. For a second, I felt relieved like the storm had passed. Then Mia saw me and grinned like she had remembered something. "Oh, tell him what you just said," she nudged her friend. I felt the dread climb back up my spine inch by inch. Her friend looked at me and tried not to smile too wide. "We were saying we should give you a nickname," she said. Mia clapped her hands and offered two options with a laugh. Both names were tied to how quick I finished that first night. The table voted like they were naming a pet or product. I tried to shut that part down harder finally. "Okay, no nickname," I said and held up my hand. My voice came out sharper than before, a little clipped. For a heartbeat no one spoke and I felt actual quiet. Then Mia snorted and called me touchy while everyone smirked. That moment should have told me everything, honestly. She looked more annoyed by my discomfort than her own behavior. Her arm slid off my shoulders and she leaned into her friend. I watched her turn away while still talking about me openly. I sat there right next to them feeling like background noise. The waiter dropped the check and jokes started again over numbers. Somebody teased me about tipping extra to make up for performance. He laughed and raised his eyebrows waiting for my reaction. I tossed in my card and made some weak comeback line. I knew I sounded like a guy trying to prove he could take it. On the ride back, Mia scrolled through her phone and chuckled. I stared out the window and counted streetlights like reset buttons. "Are you mad?" she asked without looking up from her screen. "A little," I answered, and even that felt like understatement. She sighed hard like I had ruined the fun part of her night. "It was just jokes," she said, eyes still on her messages. "Everyone talks about their relationships," she added like a rule. "You act like I leaked your social security or something," she scoffed. That comparison actually stunned me for a second into silence. To her, my body and my trust were punchline material, not damage. I told her I felt exposed and weird, not just teased. I said that some things felt personal to me, not shareable. She shrugged and said I needed to loosen up or I'd go crazy. She reached over and squeezed my knee like that fixed it. My body leaned into the touch again, my brain pulled back. Here's the part I hate admitting now that I'm writing this. I dropped it that night way faster than I should have. I let her change the subject to weekend plans and brunch. I laughed at something she showed me on her screen. I helped forget my own boundary because I wanted peace. Back then I told myself it was a one-time overshare. I told myself she just got carried away and would dial back. I had no idea that night was the friendly version. The soft launch of how my life would become group entertainment. If I'd understood that, I might have walked away right then. Her phone buzzed 3 times in a row on the couch. Mia laughed at the screen and covered her mouth. Her feet were on my lap, toes pressing into my leg. I muted the game and listened without meaning to listen. "Stop your evil," she typed, thumbs moving fast. My name flashed as she whispered it and kept smiling. I tried to play it cool and leaned my head back. "What's so funny?" I asked, eyes on the ceiling. "Nothing, just the girls," she answered, phone tilted away. The way the screen angled made my stomach twist tight. If it was harmless, why guard it like a secret? Another vibration hit, and her shoulders shook harder. She shoved her phone against her chest and wheezed. "Oh my God, they're insane," she said, wiping her eyes. Then she glanced at me like she remembered I existed. "Not about you," she added a little too fast. You know when someone over-explains and it lands wrong. That moment where your brain goes, "Wait, back up." I forced a grin and squeezed her ankle under my hand. "Good to know I'm not the main joke tonight." She smiled, but her thumb already drifted back to typing. The TV lit the room and I pretended to watch. She kept reacting to whatever popped up in her chat. Little gasps, quick snorts, head thrown back for a second. Every reaction dragged my focus to that rectangle in her hand. I wanted to grab it, and I hated that urge. At one point, she lifted her phone to check a notification. The brightness hit my eyes and I caught a preview. I saw my first name and the word performance right after. The banner disappeared before my brain processed the rest. The single word stayed burning behind my eyes like a brand. I blinked slow and tried not to jerk my head. "Everything good?" I asked, voice lighter than I felt. "Yeah, we're just talking trash," she said, still smiling. She nudged my leg like I should find that comforting. I nodded, but my jaw locked so tight it ached. Look, I'm not proud of what happened later that night. I know where the privacy line is supposed to sit. I'm aware of all the rules about phones and trust. In that moment, none of that felt as real as humiliation. You can judge me, but you weren't in my skin. She fell asleep an hour later with the TV still on. Her phone rested near her stomach, screen down. Her breathing evened out while I sat there wired. I kept telling myself to drop it and let it go. My eyes stayed pinned to that black rectangle like a magnet. I got up, turned off the TV, and stood beside her. The room went quiet enough that I heard my pulse. I brushed hair away from her face and watched her jaw relax. That should have calmed me down, but it didn't. All I could think was, what exactly did you share? Her phone buzzed once against the cushion and lit up. The sudden glow cut through the dark like a flare. My gaze snapped down before I could stop myself. Another preview line showed up from the same group chat. "Tell us more about his," and then the rest faded. I laughed under my breath because it felt unreal. Of course, I whispered, more to myself than to her. The phone went dark again, back to that blank screen. My hand hovered over it and then pulled back. I felt like a thief in my own living room. I sat back down and tried to outweigh my own curiosity. I counted slow, breath slow, stared at the ceiling again. Nothing helped, everything just circled back to that notification. Those 3 words turned my thoughts into a loop trailer. It felt less like curiosity and more like self-defense. Here's the ugly truth, because I promised myself honesty now. I knew her passcode from ordering food on her phone. She never minded when I used it for that stuff. We had this casual sharing around bills and directions and playlists. So technically I didn't crack anything, I just used what I knew. I reached for the phone and paused one last time. If I opened it, I couldn't pretend ignorance anymore. If I didn't, I would lie awake inventing worse versions. Neither option felt clean, they both tasted bitter in different ways. I chose the one that at least gave me facts. My thumb tapped in the code with muscle memory. The lock screen disappeared and her home screen filled in. I opened her messages and my chest started hammering hard. There were several threads at the top, all with names I recognized. One had a crown emoji and a fire emoji around it. That chat had the most recent alert, so I tapped. The first thing I saw was my name followed by 3 laughing emojis. Lines stacked above it like a running commentary. The girls were talking fast, messages hitting back to back. My eyes skimmed, then slowed, then locked on one sentence. "He lasted longer this time, proud of your boy," one of them wrote. Another replied growth arc and added more mocking emojis. Someone else jumped in with a question about specific details. They wanted to know exactly how it went and what changed. They treated my improvement like a group project they supervised. My ears rang while I scrolled higher up the thread. There were older posts with date stamps from previous weeks. My name popped up again and again in different jokes. Comments about size, about nerves, about what I liked in bed. It read like a review page, not human conversation. I found a screenshot Mia had dropped into the chat earlier. It was of our private conversation from the night before. My text asking if I had done better that time. My line about hoping she enjoyed it more than the first night. They had reacted with reactions and comments under each bubble. Look at him fishing, one of them wrote with a clown emoji. Give him a sticker, another added like I was 5. Mia replied under that with a long message explaining everything. She broke down what we did step by step with extra commentary. My chest went tight as I read details I barely remembered saying. She had even mentioned the one thing I told her quietly. The insecurity I confessed while we were lying there afterward. I remembered the exact moment I whispered it, voice shaky. Seeing it copied and pasted into a chat made me dizzy. They turned that fragile sentence into a punchline and a poll. One friend wrote, honestly, same issue with my ex, tragic. Another said, at least he tries, with a shrug emoji. Someone else added, we love effort, bless his heart. Those words felt polite on the surface and cruel underneath. I kept blinking, hoping the screen would somehow change. I scrolled more and found another screenshot further back. This one wasn't even about messages, it was visual. She had snapped a picture of me sleeping on my stomach. The caption underneath said, this man knocked out after 30 seconds. The chat below it was full of short, brutal reactions. Power nap king. Speed round champion. Pre-game more next time, girl. That last one finished with a winking emoji. Each small message chipped off another piece of my confidence. I could feel sweat on my back while I kept reading. Part of me wanted to stop at every new message. Another part scrolled faster, looking for any sign of defense. I wanted to see Mia telling them to cut it out. I didn't find a single line where she pushed back. To be fair, some comments treated me like a real person. One friend wrote that at least I seemed thoughtful and attentive. Another said it was better than dating a selfish player. That should have comforted me maybe on some level. Instead, it just highlighted how public our relationship had become. Mia had sent a long text near the top of the thread. She wrote that she low-key loved how eager I was. She called me too sweet and kind of clueless but adorable. Then she ranked different experiences like she was rating shows. My name sat there next to a number I would not repeat. I want to be clear, I'm not pretending perfect innocence here. I have joked about past hookups with people I trusted. I've told stories that probably revealed more than necessary. But reading a full panel discussion about my body hit different. It wasn't one stray remark, it was a whole running series. The latest message in the chat waited at the bottom. It was from the same friend who had asked for details. Tell us more about his improvement scientifically, she wrote. Mia had just typed okay so picture last night and stopped. I realized I had interrupted her mid-response when I opened the phone. I stared at that unfinished sentence and my hands shook. If I locked the phone now, I would never know the rest. If I kept reading, I might never look at her the same. I hovered over the keyboard while my thumb twitched. In the bedroom, she shifted and exhaled, making me freeze. Her hand moved toward the empty space beside her. She patted the blanket like she felt me missing. For a second, I thought she would wake up fully. She rolled to the other side instead and went quiet. That tiny movement slammed me with fresh guilt and anger. I closed the messages and watched the icons blur for a moment. All the justifications started piling up in my head again. It's normal, everybody vents, guys do worse, it's not that deep. Then my brain replayed those lines about my growth arc. It sounded less like venting and more like entertainment programming. I put the phone back exactly how it had been before. Screen down, same angle, same distance from her hand. I stood there for a while, just listening to my heartbeat. I wondered if any of them would talk like that about themselves. Or if I was just the safe target because I never knew. When I finally lay down next to her, I stayed stiff. She rolled toward me in her sleep and draped an arm. My body flinched, then forced itself to relax under her weight. My mind kept seeing little bubbles of text instead of her face. I stared into the dark and counted breaths until morning. The next day, everything between us felt slightly off, like static. She moved around the kitchen, humming and checking her notifications. I watched her from the doorway and tried to read her expression. She seemed relaxed, casual, like nothing had shifted overnight. Meanwhile, I felt like I was carrying a loaded secret. She handed me a mug and brushed my arm with hers. "You're quiet today," she mentioned, glancing up for half a second. "Just tired," I answered, my go-to excuse for everything. I saw her phone light up on the counter near her elbow. Her eyes darted to the screen faster than to my face. I knew I had two choices in that moment, very clear. I could bring up the chat and admit I had snooped. Or I could swallow it, act normal, and pretend nothing changed. Both options scared me for different reasons and different outcomes. I chose silence, which turned out to be the worst one. I convinced myself maybe I had blown it out of proportion. Maybe that chat was just how her friends processed their relationships. Maybe if I spoke up, they would paint me as controlling. I told myself to wait, to gather more context, to be rational. You can hear the spiral right even from here. Looking back, that breakfast was the start of the real shift. Not the bar, not the jokes, not even the first screenshot. The real damage started when I decided to monitor instead of confront. I turned into my own investigator in my own relationship. And once you take that job, you never really clock out. I slammed the laptop closed harder than I meant to. Mia glanced over from the couch, one eyebrow already climbing. "You good?" she asked, stretching her legs out toward me. "Yeah, fine," I answered too fast, pulse jumping in my neck. That one small lie sat heavy between us like a loaded box. I felt the words pushing up, hot and crowded. If I swallowed them again, I knew they'd rot. "If I ask you something, will you answer straight?" She shifted upright a little, interest flickering across her face. Those few seconds before her response stretched longer than I liked. "Why are you being weird?" she asked, arms folding tight. I could hear my own breathing over the quiet. "What exactly do you tell them about us?" I asked. "The group chat, your friends, what do they know?" Her eyes narrowed just enough to make everything feel louder. She let out a short laugh that didn't match her expression. "Wow, going straight for it, huh?" she said, lips tightening. I watched her study me like I was a test. "Normal stuff," she added, shrugging like that covered everything. That word's normal hit me harder than any insult. "Define normal," I said, fingers locked together. "Like stories, updates, things girlfriends talk about." She waved her hand in a loose circle, dismissive. "Do you talk about what happens in bed?" I asked. Her jaw twitched just once before she answered. "Sometimes," she replied, eyes dropping for a second. "Everyone does, it's how we blow off steam." My stomach clenched at the phrase, "everyone does." "Like funny stories," she added, reaching for my knee. I moved my leg before her hand got there. That tiny movement changed the whole tone instantly. Her mouth flattened and her voice dropped lower. "You're actually mad about this?" she asked, leaning back. I nodded because pretending otherwise felt insane. That was when the defensive version of her walked in. "Okay, you need to relax," she started, hands slicing the air. "It's just jokes, they don't think you're some loser." "They literally call me things in there," I said quietly. Her eyes flicked up fast, then she forced them steady again. I had not planned to reveal that part so soon. "You looked at my phone," she snapped, leaning forward. There it was, the pivot I knew was coming. "So now I'm the problem because I checked?" I asked. "Do you hear yourself right now?" she shot back. My chest burned and my cheeks went numb. "Answer me first," I said, voice shaking despite my effort. "Do they know what I'm insecure about down there?" Her tongue pressed against her teeth as she stared. "I might have mentioned you were self-conscious, yeah." Hearing it out loud made my fingers curl into fists. "Did you send them our texts?" I asked, throat tight. "Which texts?" she asked, shifting her weight on the cushion. "The ones where I asked if I did better," I replied. Her gaze slipped to the side before finding me again. "Maybe a screenshot or two," she muttered, almost inaudible. "It hit like a second wave after you think you survived." "So they read me asking you if I pleased you," I said. "They read me asking for reassurance and you joked about it." That is not what happened, she fired back, eyes flashing. I could see the part of her that believed that fully. How would you describe it then? I asked, voice raw. She dragged a hand down her face, exhaling slowly. I shared that you were trying hard and improving, she answered. They were being supportive in their own way. I remembered the clown emoji and almost laughed in her face. And the nicknames, I pushed, feeling something snap inside. I watched the color drain from her face at th. Ed. You saw everything, huh? She murmured, lip trembling slightly. That one got a little out of hand, she added quickly. No apology yet, just a light tap on the brakes. So you know it was messed up, I pressed. She flinched at the word mess like it stung. I know it probably bothered you, she said slowly. I didn't think you'd ever actually read it. That slipped out before she could dress it up. I just stared at her for a moment, stunned. So the issue isn't what you did, it's getting caught. Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. You're twisting my words, she insisted, hands tightening into fists. I honestly felt like I was losing my grip on reality. I felt humiliated, I told her, voice dropping lower. I felt like a character in your friend's group show. She shook her head, eyes suddenly wet but still stubborn. I never meant to humiliate you, she said, finally softer. That was the first time the word meant showed up. I believed they were just laughing with us, she continued. You laughed at the bar, you joked too. I laughed because I froze, I shot back, chest aching. I laughed because disagreeing in front of them felt dangerous. Saying that out loud made me realize how twisted it had gotten. She wiped under one eye with her thumb and sniffed. I talked to my friends about everything, she said, voice wavering. That's how I've always handled relationships and problems. I'm not your problem you vent about, I answered quietly. I'm the person you claim to love. She winced at that word like I had hit bone. That's not fair, she whispered, shoulders curling inward. I love you, this is just how I cope. By trading intimate details for reactions, I asked. The silence after that question felt sharp enough to cut. She stood up and paced a few steps across the room. Her fingers tangled in her hair as she walked. You invaded my privacy, she finally threw at me. You broke trust when you went through my messages. She spun around, eyes blazing like that settled everything. I broke trust after you turned my body into content, I replied. She flinched again, but her jaw stayed clenched. You could have talked to me instead of spying, she argued. If I had asked directly, would you have told me the truth, I asked. The way she hesitated answered that better than any words. I would have told you they tease sometimes, she said slowly. I probably wouldn't have shown you every message. So no, I said, leaning back against the couch. She crossed her arms again, building a wall out of herself. In that moment, we stood on opposite sides of everything. You're making this huge, she said, voice gaining strength again. Guys talk about sex all the time, so don't pretend they don't. Yeah, and they're trash for it when they cross lines, I replied. I've been that guy and I know it's wrong. Owning that out loud didn't make me feel any cleaner. She stared at me like she didn't recognize the person talking. You want me to have no one to talk to, she asked. You want me to bottle everything up just to protect your ego. I want you to draw a line at mocking me, I answered. The things I tell you in bed are not group material. Her shoulders slumped a little, the fight leaving her posture. Fine, she said, letting out a long breath. I'll tone it down, I won't share that much anymore. That word anymore kept echoing in my head. It sounded like a loose promise, not real accountability. Can you delete the stuff about me? I asked. Her eyes widened like I had requested something outrageous. That's not how these chats work, she answered slowly. It would be weird to go back and erase everything. I realized I wanted her to do something she clearly never would. So it all just stays there forever, I asked, throat dry. Screenshots, jokes, my insecurities, all stored for entertainment. You act like they're posting it online, she snapped again. It's a closed group, they're my closest people. Somehow that made it feel worse, not better. We both stood there breathing hard in the thick silence. I'm trying to meet you in the middle, she insisted eventually. I acknowledged your feelings, I agreed to share less. I need more than less, I replied, feeling the words shake. I need you to actually be protective of me. She stared at me like she was weighing something inside. You're asking me to change how I've vented for years, she said. You're basically asking me to cut off my emotional outlet. I'm asking you to stop using me as entertainment, I answered. We just looked at each other, both stubborn and exhausted. She finally exhaled and dropped back onto the couch. I'm sorry you were hurt, she said, eyes on the floor. That little phrase landed wrong the second it left her mouth. It sounded like a customer service line, not something personal. I knew then this conversation had reached its limit. I don't think you really get why this crushed me, I admitted. She opened her mouth and then closed it again. I hear you, she said instead, voice flat, almost practiced. I'll try to be more careful, that's all I can promise. Careful felt very different from safe in that moment. We went quiet, the fight just hanging there between us. She grabbed the remote and turned on some show for noise. I sat next to her but felt miles away inside. We laughed at a couple of lines neither of us absorbed. Both of us pretending this counted as moving on. Later when she went to shower, my phone buzzed. It was her friend Jenna, the one who always joked hardest. The preview showed my name and a question mark. My stomach dropped even before I opened it fully. I already knew I was about to see something ugly. You okay? Her message read, followed by a worried emoji. Please tell me you two didn't explode over our chat. My thumb hovered above the keyboard as I considered. I typed "we're fine" and erased it twice. I finally wrote "not great" and hit send. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then came back again. Can we talk for a second? She replied. Before I could answer, another message popped in fast. Not in the chat, just you and me. My pulse climbed because that sounded like a confession. I met her the next day outside a coffee place. She waved me over with a small, uncertain smile. I owe you honesty, she started, twisting a napkin. This is going to make you hate me a little. That was the moment I realized the chat hadn't shown everything. So we screwed you over worse than you think. That was Jenna's opening line, no greeting, no warm-up. Her fingernails shredded the napkin while she watched my face. I wrapped my hands around the paper cup just to anchor myself. Okay, I said, throat tight, how much worse are we talking? My heart was already racing before she even answered. There's stuff we said that never made it to screenshots. She stared at the table like it might swallow her. Mia deletes her own comments sometimes after the rush. That detail hit harder than any insult in that chat. She cleaned her trail, not her behavior. What kind of stuff? I asked, jaw clenched. Jenna winced and rubbed her forehead with 2 fingers. Extra jokes, ratings, more vivid descriptions than what you saw. She blew out a slow breath and finally looked at me. We treated your anxiety like a running gag. I felt that sentence hit everywhere at once. A buzzing started in my ears and would not fade. So you all knew how insecure I was? I asked. And that made it more entertaining. Jenna flinched like the word entertaining burned. I won't pretend we were kind, she said quietly. We went for laughs first, feelings later, if ever. She twisted the napkin so hard it tore in half. I told them we were crossing a line, she added. Sometimes I still joined in anyway. That admission somehow made it worse, not better. It meant she felt the wrongness and kept going. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. You could have just stayed quiet and kept the friendship. Her cheeks flushed as she shrugged one shoulder. Because Mia texted us after your fight, she answered. She gave us a whole recap like it was an episode. My stomach lurched even though I saw that coming. She quoted you word for word, Jenna continued, voice soft. Even the part where you asked to feel protected. For a second I forgot how to sit still. I pushed back from the table and then sat again. So my attempt to set a boundary became more material, I said. Jenna nodded, eyes dropping to the torn napkin again. She framed you as dramatic, not hurt. I let out a short laugh, sharp and humorless. Of course she did, I muttered under my breath. Jenna's gaze lifted, heavy with something like shame. I'm not here to defend her, not today, she said. I just thought you deserved the full picture. A nasty thought slipped out before I could stop it. If you all saw how cruel it got, why stay? I asked. She swallowed hard and looked away toward the street. Because we're messy and loyal in twisted ways, she answered. And because walking away from a group is harder than it sounds. I wanted to argue, but I recognized that logic. I've stayed places long after I knew they hurt me. So what now? I asked, fingers tapping the cup. You dropped this bomb and I just thank you. My voice cracked on the last word, and I hated it. Jenna leaned forward, elbows on the small table. If you stay with her, you need eyes open, she said. If you leave, you should know it wasn't in your head. She hesitated, then reached into her bag with a sigh. I screenshotted some things before she deleted them. She slid her phone across the table, screen lit. I stared down at a thread of messages I recognized. Same chat name, same people, different level of cruelty. Mia's deleted comments sat there preserved. In little bubbles. My chest tightened as I read her words about me. She said you were clingy about sex and approval, Jenna said. She joked that you needed a committee to sign off. My lungs felt too small for my body at that point. Every line stacked on top of the ones I already knew. There was no angle left where this looked harmless. I'm sorry, Jenna whispered, fingers curled around her own drink. I laughed. I contributed. I should have stopped it sooner. I believed she meant it, and it still didn't help much. Why help me now then? I asked, eyes still on the screen. Because watching you doubt yourself made me feel sick, she answered. I walked out of that meeting with my head spinning. The air outside felt different, thinner, harder to pull in. Every step toward my car sounded too loud in my ears. I kept replaying Mia's face during our argument on the couch. She looked offended that I didn't trust her. Here's the strange part I still hate admitting. Even after all that, part of me still wanted her. I still pictured her curled up on our couch waiting. I still craved the version of her that held me after rough days. The version that didn't share the worst parts with an audience. Sitting in the driver's seat, I stared at the wheel. If I confronted her again, she'd flip it back on me. She'd focus on the snooping and the screenshots, not content. I needed something so clear she couldn't spin it. Something that proved this wasn't just old habits lingering. That was when the idea hit, ugly and sharp. I would hand her a secret and watch where it traveled. Something believable, embarrassing, but completely made up. If it stayed between us, I'd have to reconsider everything. If it leaked, I'd finally be done explaining this to myself. I sat there thinking through options like a deranged strategist. Fake cheating story, too explosive, too many side effects. Money issue not tied to the thing that actually hurt. I needed it connected to the same vulnerable place she'd weaponized. Something about my body that would tempt another round of jokes. I settled on a health scare, specific and personal. I decided to tell her I might have a hormonal problem. Nothing serious enough to send us rushing to the hospital. Serious enough that it would sting if anyone treated it lightly. Serious enough she should instinctively protect it. The plan felt disgusting, I won't lie about that. I hated that she had pushed me into playing games. At the same time, I felt calmer with a test in mind. Clear steps, clear result, no more gaslighting myself into circles. I drove home, repeating the story in my head until it fit. When I walked in, she was on the couch with her phone. She looked up, smile ready, eyes narrowing when she saw my face. You okay? She asked, setting the phone on the cushion. I need to tell you something kind of personal, I answered. I watched her spine straighten, curiosity waking up. If this is about our fight, I'm tapped out, she warned. It's not the fight, I said, shaking my head. It's about me, physically. I'm trying not to freak out. That last part came out more honest than I meant. My hands actually trembled, which helped the acting. Her whole expression shifted into concern pretty fast. She patted the space beside her and waited for me. I sat down, kept my gaze on my own fingers. So I've noticed some stuff going wrong lately, I started. It might be testosterone or something like that. Silence dropped over the room, heavy and careful. What do you mean? She asked, voice lower and slower. I've been having trouble staying up, I answered, cheeks burning. Not every time, but enough that I Googled it. I let my voice crack on Googled for extra realism. Her hand landed on my shoulder, warm and steady. Baby, she breathed out, why didn't you tell me sooner? Because I wanted to see what you'd do with it. Because I hate that I am testing you like this. Those answers stayed locked behind my teeth. I felt embarrassed, I said instead, staring at the floor. Especially after everything they already know about our life. Her fingers tightened on my shoulder at that reminder. They don't know everything, she rushed out, eyes wide. I told you I'd stop oversharing. So I need you to promise something, I replied. I finally looked straight at her so she felt the weight. Whatever happens with this, you keep it between us. No group chat, no jokes, no tiny hints, I added. I can't handle being a topic again. She nodded fast, almost offended I had to ask. Of course, she said, hand sliding down my arm. I would never make fun of something like that. That phrase sat there neat and confident and wrong. I almost asked her to repeat it on camera. We spent the rest of that night in weird tenderness. She was gentle, patient, almost overly reassuring during everything. I leaned into it while hating that the whole thing was Jed. Every soft word felt real and fake at the same time. I barely slept, just listened to her breathe beside me. The next day was torture in slow motion. I carried my phone everywhere, waiting for a notification. At work, every buzz made my heart slam against my ribs. Most alerts were junk, nothing to do with her or them. Each false alarm ratcheted my tension higher. By lunch, I hated myself for running this experiment. I hated the suspicion, the focus, the way I scanned everything. Part of me prayed nothing would come, that I was wrong. Another part whispered that I needed this clear answer. Living in maybe had already wrecked enough of me. Around mid-afternoon, my screen lit with a new message. Jenna's name flashed at the top with a short preview. You okay? Heard you got some issues down there. My vision tunneled so fast I had to grab the desk. I opened the chat with fingers that barely felt solid. I read her full text twice, slower the second time. Mia told us about the hormone stuff. Are you seeing someone? She says she's being supportive, just wants you to be proactive. A second bubble followed before I could respond at all. Promise we're not judging, stuff like that happens. There it was, clean, undeniable, no way to twist it. One conversation, one night, and the secret had traveled. No delay, no filter, no attempt to ask my permission. I stared at the words hormone stuff until they blurred. My throat closed so tight I struggled to swallow. Any lingering doubt collapsed in that moment completely. I wasn't crazy, I wasn't oversensitive, I wasn't imagining patterns. This was who she chose to be when I wasn't there. This was how she handled information I begged her to protect. Whatever came next, I knew I couldn't unknow this. The first page hit the table before anyone finished laughing. Every head snapped toward the stack in front of Mia's plate. Her friends still had half smiles that didn't match their eyes. My fingers rested on the top sheet so they wouldn't shake. Birthday present, I said, voice steady in a way that felt fake. Nobody reached for it, which told me they already sensed danger. Alex, what are you doing? Mia asked, hand hovering near mine. Her tone tried for playful and landed closer to warning. I slid the papers toward the center, just out of her reach. Group activity, I answered, leaning back in my chair. Since I'm the topic, I figured I'd read along tonight. Jenna's gaze dropped to the printout and stayed there. The others traded quick looks like they were checking exits. I flipped the first page open so the text faced upward. Black and white lines, names, timestamps, all in neat rows. You could feel the mood in the room drop 10 degrees. What is that? One of the guys asked, throat clearing hard. His fingers tapped a restless rhythm on his fork. Mia reached out faster this time, palm flat on the page. Nothing, it's nothing, he's overdoing it, she said, forcing a laugh. I slid the sheet out from under her hand before she grabbed tighter. It's the chat, I said, loud enough for the whole table. The one where you all discuss my body like a show. Chairs scraped a little as people shifted in their seats. Someone muttered, "Oh my God," under their breath. The server passing by pretended not to hear any of it. Mia's smile vanished so fast it looked like a glitch. Where did you even get that? She asked, pupils blown wide. Jenna wasn't as comfortable as the rest of you, I replied. I saw Jenna flinch, shoulders curling inward like she wanted to disappear. Mia's eyes cut straight to her with something sharp behind them. Don't drag me into this, Jenna said, fingers gripping her glass. He deserves to know how far it went. The others stared between them like watching a slow accident. I cleared my throat and tapped the first highlighted line. Let's not argue about sourcing, let's talk about content. I read the first message out, word for word. He lasted longer this time, proud of your boy. I paused, letting the stupid phrase hang in the air. Laughter from another table floated from somewhere behind us. Ours stayed dead silent, every eye locked on the page. I turned the sheet so I could see the next one. Growth arc, cute, didn't know my sex life had season renewals. One friend stared at her hands like they were suddenly fascinating. Another pressed her lips together until they turned almost white. No one volunteered a defense, which almost shocked me. Mia shifted in her chair, bracelets clinking in a restless rhythm. Okay, we went too far sometimes, she said, voice tight. We already talked about this, you and me, remember? That was before I saw the director's cut, I answered. You deleted your worst lines from your phone, not from theirs. I flipped to another page and read the next part. Look at him fishing, that one is about my text, right? The one where I asked if you enjoyed being with me. My voice shook on that last word more than I wanted. One of the women across from me looked actually nauseous. Can we not do this here? Mia asked, fingers digging into her napkin. Her eyes darted toward the bar like she wanted to bolt. Why not here? I asked, keeping my tone almost calm. You had no problem making me material at this exact table. I watched that memory hit everyone at once. I read another highlighted section in the same flat voice. Power Nap King, Speed Round Champion, pregame more next time. I glanced up, you voted on those like it was fun trivia. The guy nearest me rubbed his forehead and looked away. He had been the one clapping at that bar night. Dude, we were just messing around, he started, voice rough. That's not messing around, I cut in, pulse pounding. That's deconstructing me in a circle I never agreed to join. He shut his mouth and stared at his plate instead. The sound of ice clinking in glasses filled the gap. I moved to the next sheet without giving anyone time. Here's my favorite part, I said, flipping it over. We should give him a nickname, then 2 options. I read them both out loud, every letter, every stupid pun. People physically winced at hearing them said in full. Her best friend, the one who had loved those nicknames, spoke up. We were drunk that night, we didn't mean it literally. So you only disrespect people when you're drunk? I asked. That's supposed to make me feel safer around you. She opened her mouth, then shut it again just as fast. Mia leaned toward me, voice dropping to a low hiss. You're humiliating me in front of everyone right now. I laughed once, short and sharp, because that word did it. Welcome to my world, I answered, meeting her eyes. Except I never volunteered for the role. Jenna took a breath like she was about to jump into cold water. He told you he felt exposed the first time, she reminded. You kept sending things after that, you know you did. One of the other women snapped, why are you siding with him? Jenna's reply came fast, because he's right. I flipped to the last page, the freshest wound. This part is recent, very recent, I said, tapping the heading. A couple of them leaned forward without meaning to. I read the lines slowly so there was no confusion. Mia told us about the hormone stuff, are you seeing someone? My voice went quieter for the last sentence. She says she's being supportive, just wants you to be proactive. I let the words sit there while the table processed them. Mia's fork slipped from her fingers and hit the plate. The sound made half the table jump. You made that up, she whispered, eyes wide and unfocused. No, I answered, the health problem was made up. The quote is real, the message is real, the betrayal is real. I watched her pull back like I had shoved her. One hand went to her chest, fingers digging into her skin. You lied to me, she said, voice climbing higher. You invented a condition just to trap me. I shook my head, feeling something inside me finally settle. I gave you one more chance to treat my privacy like yours, I said. You treated it like fresh material before the bed even cooled. One of the women across from us covered her mouth. Oh my God, she whispered, looking between us. Mia spun on her, you told him, she snapped, pointing. The woman shook her head so fast her earrings swung. Jenna raised her hand slightly, I did. Mia focused on Jenna like she might actually explode. You broke the rule, she said, voice trembling with rage. Chat stays in the chat, that was always the rule. Jenna's eyes shone, but she didn't look away from her. Maybe the rule was trash, she answered, words quiet but clear. This was between us, Mia threw at me, already shifting gears. You took private conversations and printed them like flyers. You mean the private conversation where everyone dissected me? I asked. The one my own partner delivered me to, piece by piece. My hands finally stopped trembling while I said that. I turned to the others, forcing myself to meet each gaze. I'm not doing this to ruin her party, I said. I'm doing it because she told me I imagined the damage. She called it normal and harmless and said I was sensitive. I wanted you all to hear the words out loud. No one spoke for a long stretch that felt endless. The noise from surrounding tables suddenly felt far away. One friend finally whispered, "This isn't okay." I couldn't even tell who she meant by this. It still landed like a verdict. Mia pushed her chair back with a harsh scrape. Her breathing came quick, shoulders lifting and falling like she had run. "You violated my phone, you violated my trust," she yelled. "Do you know how insane this looks right now?" People at nearby tables started turning their heads toward us. I stayed seated because standing felt too close to shouting. "You ripped through my dignity months ago," I answered. "You turned me into an ongoing show without consent. This is the first time you've had to watch the rerun." That line came out colder than I expected. One of the guys cleared his throat, voice unsteady. "Mia, he's not wrong," he said, avoiding her eyes. We all laughed, we all piled on, it was messed up. She rounded on him so fast his chair jerked. "You too, seriously," she demanded, hands thrown up. Jenna jumped in before he could backtrack or soften it. "We did screw up," she said, chin lifted slightly. "We let it be open season on him because it was easy. Doesn't matter that guys do it too, it was ugly." Hearing someone else say that made my ribs loosen a bit. Mia looked around the table and realized something. No one was nodding with her, no one was laughing. Every face showed some mix of guilt and discomfort. For once, I wasn't the only person feeling small. I almost felt sorry for her in that second. Almost. She turned back to me, eyes glassy and furious. "So what now?" she asked, voice shaking with anger. "You wanted to embarrass me, mission accomplished. You wanted them to feel bad, great, they feel bad. What do you actually want from this?" I thought about that for a beat, trying to be honest. A part of me had wanted exactly this silence. Another part had fantasized about her understanding on her own. That second part clearly lived in some other universe. "I wanted you to see what you sound like," I answered. I gathered the pages into one stack and tapped them straight. "You talk about me like I'm not in the room," I said. "Like I'm not a person who has to wake up in this body. You could have stopped, you didn't want to." Every sentence drained something out of me as I said it. She stared at the stack like it might catch fire. Then she laughed once, a harsh, broken sound. "You know what?" she said, wiping under her eyes. "This is psycho, you're psycho for doing this to me." Her words shook, but they still landed like thrown objects. I felt weirdly calm by then, which scared me a little. Not detached, not numb, just done in a very deep way. For months I had tried to adjust myself around her behavior. Twist my expectations, shrink my reactions, rationalize her choices. Looking at those pages, I knew there was nothing left to bend. I set the stack down right in front of her plate. "You can keep them," I said, pushing my chair back. "Consider it a transcript of the show you created." Her hand hovered above the paper, fingers curled like claws. Everyone watched us, waiting for someone to make the next move. I stood up from the table and pushed my chair back. Nobody moved. Cutlery sat where it was, untouched. Mia's fingers hovered over the stack of paper. Her eyes flicked from the pages to my face. "Sit down," she said, voice low, like I was the one misbehaving. I laid my napkin on the table and straightened. "I'm heading out," I said, keeping my tone steady. "This is the last time I hear my life punched up like this." A couple of her friends looked at their laps, faces tight. It hit me that none of them would actually stop me. Mia pushed her chair back so fast it scraped. "You're not walking out in the middle of my birthday," she snapped. Her hand closed around my wrist before I could turn. "After everything I've done for you, you do this." Her grip hurt more because part of me still wanted it. I eased my hand free, slower than I felt inside. People at nearby tables were definitely watching now. "We can talk outside," I said, nodding toward the door. "Or we can never talk again, your call." Her mouth set like stone while she weighed that. She grabbed her bag and followed me toward the exit. I heard whispering start behind us, thick and nervous. The noise of the bar hit me as soon as we stepped away. My heart pounded hard enough that I felt it in my ears. I kept walking until we reached the sidewalk. The door shut and the street muffled everything. Mia rounded on me, eyes wild and shiny. You ambushed me, she said, hands cutting through the air. You humiliated me in front of my closest people. Her voice shook with rage and something like panic. You did that to yourself, I answered, leaning against the wall. You wrote those lines, you sent those screenshots, not me. You stalked my phone, she shot back, jabbing a finger. You plotted for weeks to make me look like a monster. Hearing the word monster hit me in a way I didn't expect. I plotted to get a straight answer, I said quietly. You had so many chances to stop before tonight. She laughed once, short and bitter, rubbing her forehead. You literally faked a health problem just to bait me. That is not normal behavior, no matter how you spin it. Neither is turning your partner into a running gag, I snapped. I was desperate enough to lie because you gaslit me. The word hung there and I watched her face twist. Do not use therapy buzzwords on me, she snarled. That is not what this is. Then what is it? I asked, stepping closer. Describe it without saying everyone does it or just jokes. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. I vented, I shared, I messed up sometimes, she said. But I never meant to damage you like this. That phrase again meant intent. The safest place for people who do reckless things. You did hurt me though, I answered, slower now. For months, in every room where my name came up. I live with that, not them. She stared at the ground, teeth digging into her lip. You're really going to dump me over some messages, she whispered. That's where we're at now. Her shoulders trembled once, then stayed rigid. A couple walked by and glanced at us, then kept moving. This was never just messages, I said, shaking my head. This was trust, intimacy, safety, all of it. You called me needy and ridiculous when I tried to set a boundary. You sold my secrets for laughs, then got mad I saw the receipts. Saying it out loud made my stomach twist and unclench at once. I loved you, she threw back, eyes flicking up fast. I still do, that has to count for something. It did, and that was the worst part, honestly. Because love without respect just means longer, deeper damage. I could feel that lesson settling in my bones. I love you too, I said, voice rough and honest. Her face crumpled for half a second at that. But I can't stay with someone who narrates my bedroom to spectators. I can't keep wondering what version of me is being performed. Quiet surrounded us in a way that felt final. So that's it, she asked, arms wrapping around herself. One bad habit and you throw everything away. Bad habit. The phrase almost made me laugh and cry together. You call this a habit, I call it a pattern. I told you I would change, she insisted, stepping closer. I told you I'd stop telling them everything. You told them about the fake hormone scare the same night, I replied. That was my last test, you failed in under 24 hours. Watching that sink in felt like watching a building collapse. She backed up until her shoulders hit the wall behind her. I was scared, she said, voice smaller, raw. I thought you were serious, I needed advice, I panicked. You needed reactions, I said, shaking my head. You went to them before even asking me how I felt. Tears slid down her cheeks and she wiped them away hard. You're making me sound like some cruel villain, she said. I'm not, I'm just loud, I overshare, I always have. I didn't realize it would wreck someone like this. Her voice cracked on wreck and my chest stung again. I don't think you're evil, I answered and meant it. I think you're careless with things that aren't yours to give. My body, my fears, my mistakes, those are mine. You posted them in a private theater and charged tickets in affection. That metaphor came out of nowhere and hit both of us. She stared at me like she wished she could rewind months. I can fix it, she whispered almost to herself. I can talk to them, make them delete everything. The damage isn't in their phones, I said softly. It's in my head now, that's where it lives. We stood there in silence for a long beat. I could hear music faintly through the door behind us. People inside probably assumed we were patching things up. I realized that was what we usually did after every blow-up. This time I felt something else entirely. I'm moving out, I said, finally giving it shape. Her eyes widened like I had slapped her. When, she asked, voice barely above a whisper. As soon as I can find a place and pack, I answered. I'm not dragging this out for months. You can't just decide that alone, she said, anger sparking again. This is our home, our life, our routines. It stopped feeling like ours when I became a storyline, I replied. I've already been alone in this for a while. My hands shook again, but the words stayed firm. She looked past me for a moment toward the parking lot. When she looked back, something in her had drained away. Fine, she said, voice flat now almost empty. Do whatever makes you feel like a hero in this. That word hero stung because I felt anything but. I turned toward the lot, then paused and glanced back. For what it's worth, I hope you actually think about this, I said. About what it means when people trust you with their soft parts. Because if you keep treating that as content, you'll lose more people. Not a threat, just a prediction I could already see. She didn't answer. She just stared past me like she was looking through glass. I walked to my car, every step heavier and somehow lighter. When I opened the door, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I checked it mechanically before starting the engine. It was a text from Jenna. Did you make it out okay? I stared at the words, then typed slowly. I wrote, I'm done letting everyone laugh at my expense. Then I locked my screen and dropped the phone on the seat. The next few days were full of cardboard and silence. I packed my clothes in quick, frantic bursts between shifts. Mia alternated between cold politeness and explosive messages. I can't believe you're actually doing this showed up 3 times. None of those texts said I'm sorry without a defense attached. She watched from the doorway while I folded the last stack. You really won't stay and try therapy or something, she asked. You'd rather burn it all down than learn to move on. I zipped the duffel bag and straightened my back. I'm moving on by leaving, I answered, not raising my voice. You'll regret this, she said, arms crossed like armor. You'll date someone boring who never talks about you at all. That sentence told me everything I needed about her priorities. I want someone who talks to me, not about me, I replied. That's the difference you never cared to learn. We carried the last box to the hallway together. Neither of us spoke while we walked to the elevator. In the parking lot, she hovered near my car door. Can I ask something, she said, looking at the ground. Are you going to tell people I was abusive? The word hung there between us, heavy and loaded. I thought about every story I'd heard from friends before. How easily people weaponize that word for arguments and points. I'm going to tell people what you did, I answered. They can decide what to call it. I'm done managing your image. She nodded once, slow and brittle. Thanks for not going nuclear, she muttered. It almost made me laugh again, the bar she set. I don't want revenge, I said. I just want my dignity back. We stood there like that for another few heartbeats. Then she stepped back and shoved her hands into her pockets. Drive safe, she murmured, barely audible. I gave a small nod, got in the car, and shut the door. The sound of it closing felt like a chapter snapping shut. Weeks later, the sting didn't just vanish. I still heard echoes of those old jokes in quiet moments. I still second-guessed myself when I got close to someone. I flinched inside whenever friends teased each other too personally. My body remembered every punchline before my brain could argue. But something else started growing in that space too. I learned how to say no without apologizing after. I started separating teasing from cruelty more clearly. I paid attention to how people spoke about their partners. You can tell a lot from the stories they pick to share. I also stopped pretending I was totally innocent in life. I thought about times I'd mocked past hookups with friends. I remembered telling stories that weren't mine to hand out. The shame of that hit just as hard as what she did. I decided I never wanted to be that guy again. That's part of why I'm typing this now, honestly. Not to get a refund on my hurt, because that's gone. Not to convince strangers to hate my ex on my behalf. I'm writing this for every person who gaslights themselves like I did. For everyone who keeps asking if they're overreacting. If you feel like a character in someone else's comedy sketch. If your fears get passed around like memes in their phone. If you walk into rooms and wonder what version of you people know. That's not you being weak, that's your gut trying to speak up. I wish I had listened sooner. I'm not some saint now. I still overthink. I still replay old scenes when I can't sleep. But I don't let people audition me for the role of punchline anymore. That part of my life got canceled the night I walked out.